You're watching coverage from Devex World 2018 here in Washington, D.C. Welcome back. I'm joined here today by John Hewko, General Secretary of Rotary International. John, thanks very much for coming in.
Richard, thank you for having me.
Now, you're here today at Devex World to talk about business transforming development, and our community are probably most familiar with your work at Rotary International through your work around polio and your global polio eradication initiative. In a nutshell, what's the state of play today? Where are you at, and how did the initiative evolve?
Right. Well, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative is probably the most successful public-private partnership in the area of global health that we've had in a long time. Back in 1979, Rotarians in the Philippines started vaccinating children against polio, and they were so successful that in 1985, Rotary had, I think the right word is audacity, the audacity as a nonprofit, not as a government agency or as a multilateral, to say we are going to eradicate a disease from the face of the earth. So in 1985, we took it on as our global challenge. In 1988, we were joined by CDC, WHO, UNICEF to create the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. The Gates Foundation joined us around 10 years ago. We started with 350,000 cases of polio back in '85, 125 countries, and today as we speak, we're just down to 2 countries where the wild virus has not been stopped, Afghanistan and Pakistan, 10 cases to date. So from 350,000, we're down to just 10 cases this year.
So some pretty audacious goals, presumably by forging partnerships and leveraging collective strengths, rallying support from across sectors. How has this changed, and how would you characterize Rotary's role in polio eradication efforts today?
Well, I think the beauty of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative is that it was a partnership. And so I think one of the lessons we learned from polio is that partnership is absolutely critical. That's one lesson. The other lesson is the power of a organization of normal people who can really truly make a difference, Rotarians. And I think each of us had our own role. Rotary was the advocate, the fundraiser, the boots on the ground, CDC the virus hunter, Gates the innovator and financer, UNICEF providing logistics, and WHO really sort of the technical expertise to do it. So I think the success of this effort is largely a partnership where every partner had their defined role, working together with national governments, et cetera, and the results speak for themselves.
And so the secret of success in a partnership. I just wondered, moving on, what is the single biggest lesson that you've learned in terms of working with all of these different partners, and what is the role of innovation throughout this process?
Well, again, as I said, the key to the partnership was that there were very clearly defined roles, a clearly defined strategy. Everybody had their lane, everybody had their role to play, and everybody stuck with it. And it's been very, very successful. Obviously, we've had hiccups along the way, but I mean, we're down to 10 cases this year. I think some of the innovations that we've used is, the key in polio eradication is to get to the children. The vaccine works. We know it works. It's a matter of just vaccinating every child. And so in those areas where we have migrant population, it's been more difficult to get to the children. For example, in Pakistan, we set up polio vaccination centers at toll booths. As buses are coming through and as their cars are coming through, every child gets vaccinated. In train stations, as children get on the train, they're vaccinated. We're using GPS technology to identify villages we didn't even know existed in many countries to ensure that we can get to every child.
So it's really about sort of reaching the last mile. I'm just wondering how you're focusing now on redoubling efforts to achieve complete eradication in countries like, as you mentioned, Pakistan, Afghanistan, even Nigeria. Right.
Well, again, in any eradication effort, the last few steps are always the most difficult, and you've got to get to zero. So we really are redoubling our efforts. Rotary, for example, as Rotarians, we have contributed almost $1.8 billion to this effort. We're currently being matched 2-to-1 by the Gates Foundation. For every $50 million we raise, we'll get an additional $100 million from the Gates Foundation. Been a very successful partnership that we've had with them. And so right now it's a matter of redoubling our efforts, working with governments to make sure we have access to all the children, particularly in areas that the security perhaps is a concern. But again, we're really down to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and we're very optimistic and hopeful that we can get the job done.
And so what are the next steps there in terms of forging new partnerships or creating new alliances or finding new funding streams or targeting last mile populations? I mean, What is the secret to success here, or is it an open secret?
Well, no, I think it's just really continuing what we've been doing. Every partner has their role, working with governments to ensure that it is a top priority for the governments, whether it be Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nigeria, or any other country. Surveillance is now becoming much more important because it's not only a case of having no polio cases. You also need to continue surveilling to make sure that there's no polio virus in the environment. And so we're beginning to transition more from talking about cases of polio to how much evidence of polio virus circulating in the environment that we have. So surveillance is going to become increasingly important as we get to the final stages.
And so what is then the next frontier for Rotary as we look to a sort of post-polio environment?
Well, I think it's two things. One is we would very much are working now to make sure that the polio legacy continues. We've set up through the effort incredible surveillance network. There's a whole infrastructure in place for polio eradication that needs to be maintained and then redeployed for other global health initiatives going forward. And so that's one important piece of our post-polio effort, is to ensure and to advocate for the continuing maintenance of that structure. In terms of whether Rotary will have a next global project, we haven't really addressed that yet. Our primary goal right now is to eradicate polio. And once we get to the certification of the world as polio-free, I think at that point we can pick up our heads and say, all right, what's next? But 1.2 million Rotarians involved in a myriad of projects: water and sanitation, literacy, community development, maternal child health. It will be an interesting process to how do you get 1.2 million Rotarians to agree on something going forward.
And finally, your key message to our global development and health specialist audience. What is your message to them on some of the main lessons learned from your interventions around polio and how it can be applied to their work, say in malaria interventions?
I'd like to make sort of 2 points there. One is that it's very important for all the other global health issues we're facing that polio eradication be successful.
Yep.
Because if we're successful in eradicating polio, not only will we prevent hundreds and thousands of children forever from getting this disease, but we also set the stage for the next global health initiative. And so if you're interested in tuberculosis or malaria or HIV/AIDS, you have an interest in polio eradication being successful. Demonstrates proof of concept. It can be done. In terms of lessons learned, again, as I mentioned, there are two key lessons. One, the importance of partnership. Nobody can go it alone. Well-structured, organized partnership is absolutely critical. And then secondly, to the NGO community, the polio eradication effort and what Rotarians, 1.2 million volunteers, that had the audacity to say, we're going to eradicate a disease from the face of the earth. It is possible. If you think bold, if you think big, if you think audaciously, as you said, Richard, you as the ordinary citizen and your organizations can truly make a huge difference.
Thank you very much, John, for talking to us and looking forward to hearing you talk more about business transforming development later today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
And to our viewers, stay tuned for more coverage from Devex World 2018. Thanks for joining us.